part of our morning prayer, and in this one we shall be hearing the reading. I've chosen the Matthew reading, chapter 13, verses 53 to 58, and then we'll have a brief reflection on St. Joseph. When Jesus had finished teaching some parables, he moved on from where he was, and coming to his hometown, Nazareth, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers?" they asked. "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary, and aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown and in his own house is a prophet without honor." And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Here ends the reading. So, coming back to St. Joseph, we'll notice that he is almost relegated to the same level of unbeing as his and Mary's biological daughters, because the daughters aren't given names, Mary and the sons are named, and Joseph isn't named. He's simply the carpenter, and Jesus the carpenter's son. There's something about the reading of the Gospel of Matthew that portrays Joseph as a man of quiet dignity and a strength of faith that we don't very much hear about. Joseph doesn't speak, but he acts, and his actions are rooted in a strength of faith that I think many of us can only hope to grow into in our lives. At the beginning of the story of this gospel, Joseph is presented as the man to whom Mary is betrothed. She, of course, does disclose to him that she's pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Joseph, whether he believes or doesn't believe that that is the truth, we're not told, decides to do something which in many ways speaks of a man that is starting to have a vision of God that is bigger than what he's been told. He is presented as somebody who's just and upright, and that would mean somebody who is very much aware of Jewish law and wanting to be faithful to that. Certainly somebody who upheld it and saw it as a word from God. And yet, in his betrothal to Mary, rather than fulfilling the law, which would be a stoning to death of her and the unborn child, Joseph tries to think of a way to almost break the betrothal, just very quietly, with no big fuss, so that Mary could be protected, and maybe she could be sent away and quietly have the child somewhere else. One certainly does get the sense that Joseph really wrestled with this. No doubt part of the wrestling was trying to see whether Mary could be believed. There was no doubt up until that stage no reason to believe that she'd been unfaithful to him. Also wrestling with his conscience about what the law required and what his heart was calling him to. there's also something about Joseph that isn't so wrapped up in his own thinking that he can't be receptive to God. Because when he is asleep, he dreams, and he knows this is a word from God. He knows this is numinous. He knows without a shadow of doubt that God is engaging with him. Unlike Mary, who does question the angel, Joseph actually doesn't. He simply acts and takes Mary as his wife, and is willing to take the ridicule that the village would give him about the fact that, of course, Jesus would have been born well in advance of what would be a natural birth if Jesus was simply in Mary's womb from the time of their marriage. So it's very obvious that this child is illegitimate. And whether people gossiped about Jesus and Mary having sex before they got married, or that this was not Joseph's child, we don't know. All we know is that something about Joseph was willing to undertake God's dream, irrespective of what it did to his reputation, irrespective of the gossip that this was going to lead to around him and Mary. There's another time, again, when Mary and Joseph have actually been in Bethlehem probably a year or two, because by this stage we know they've moved out of the manger and are in a house. Joseph has a dream where God tells him again that they need to flee to Egypt. We know that the powers that be are threatened by this prophecy of another king, and God reveals to Joseph that there is going to be a threat to Jesus' life. And of course later on we know it's all about the killing of the holy innocents. But again, Joseph acts. He acts upon what most of us today would simply, I don't know, dismiss a dream. But there's this depth of spiritual life that Joseph has that really does not question numinous revelations. Up until the 16th century, not much was made of Joseph, the surrogate father of Jesus. And yet the more we reflect on this man, on his humanity, on the solidness of his faith, it's again this realization that what we so often see as small, as almost a non-entity, is never treated by God as that. Joseph not only saved Mary and Jesus' life, but through him he became part of the saving grace of our whole Christian story. So let's never underestimate what we do in faithfulness, because when we are willing to be expanded beyond the knowing of theology of the day into the greater dream which is God's, then anything that we are faithful to, no matter if the world relegates it to the small, easily dismissed, in God's world, in God's universe, these can have cosmic implications. So please, let us join with St. Joseph and be faithful to the small things, whether in word or in deed, and know that in God's plans, a have reverberations that will always be for life, for greatness of life, for abundance of life, and will be part of a God story that is just immense and profound and wondrous. Amen.